My solemn promise is to stand up for Canadian workers, to stand up for Canadian businesses. We will stand up for our history.
We need a strong, new Conservative government that will stop the crime and put Canada first for a change. We will do that. We will do it with common sense policies that take the dangerous offenders off the street.
We're going to take on the big corporations that are ripping you off. We're going to fight back against corporations that are buying up affordable homes. We're in it for you. And so we're going to make that case every day of this campaign.
6 days in as leaders fight to win votes with just 4 weeks to go ahead of Election Day on April 28th, 1 month exactly from this day, in fact. Most public opinion polling shows right now the Liberals and Conservatives are within what's known as the margin of error of each other. And this first week was replete with affordability-based policy announcements from all of the three top parties outside of Quebec and a couple of curveballs courtesy of Donald Trump. Let's bring back the front bench for their overall take of week one. Muhammad Ali, Anthony Kosh, and Alison Gifford. Alison, I'll start again with you. If there is one thing that stands out from week one to you, what is it?
You know what? I really have a hard time taking the Donald Trump out of week one because to me, I remember the morning that Carney was with, I believe it was Unifor, and there was an announcement on autos, and then Trump made his announcement on autos, and Carney was able to make a follow-up announcement on autos. And again, it's being the prime minister that gives you that access to probably more information coming from DC and being able to incorporate that in your campaign, which I've really never seen before. I also think that one of the challenges right now when you're dealing with Donald Trump and with the United States is in situations like these, there's no time for sloganeering. There's no time for rhetoric, really. You need to have a united front, and that I can see that trickling down to the leaders as well. Mr. Poilievre is a very scrappy, sloganeering kind of person on occasion, and I find it just keeps landing very flat. And so the more polarizing language, the more creative people get in terms of taking down the opponents, which is kind of what you have to do. You have to paint your opponent in a certain light that's not like you and show those difference, show the daylight between you and what you're offering Canadians. I could see all of the leaders who weren't Mark Carney really struggle with that this week.
Anthony, what do you think about that? And also, if you review the last 6 days, what stands out to you?
Well, I mean, there's a few things, especially some are Quebec-specific and some otherwise, but I actually think Mark Carney's biggest enemy has ended up being himself, in that every time he finds himself in front of a camera or a microphone, he misspeaks, insults journalists, whether it's telling Rosemary Barton to look inside herself, or whether it's telling a journalist, "Ça suffit," that's enough in French, or whether it's misnaming a star candidate or the Polytechnique massacre that she was a victim of, that resulted in her becoming a social activist to begin with. I think that what you're starting to see play out is that the Conservative base of support is very strong. So regardless of where it is, Poilievre's base is there, the Conservative base is voting Conservative, and there's very little at this point that's going to change that. Whereas Mark Carney's support is very soft. So you're seeing the NDP has experienced a complete and utter collapse. Some polling showing them even falling potentially below the Bloc Québécois in national levels, right? And I think that is the question that's yet to be seen over the course of this campaign in great effort is, to what extent is Mark Carney going to be able to maintain these Johnny-come-lately Liberals who don't usually vote for the Liberal Party, were not voting for the Liberal Party 5 minutes ago, but now find themselves wrapped up in a fervor prompted by Donald Trump, and whether or not the more they see of him, the more they're going to like him, or the more they're going to realize, yeah, I'm not so sure that I want more of the same from the Liberal Party of Canada.
Well, I actually think that's why, Mohammed, and I'd love to hear your take on it as well, the polls and public opinion polling moving forward will be more informative on that point, right? Because so far what we've seen is the Liberals able to close the gap, to be fair, in pretty much every single public opinion polling we've seen, and remain within the margin of error. But I also lived through the U.S. election where we saw two candidates within the margin of error. I see the rallies that are happening in, for example, Hamilton and Surrey last night, and the crowds that are being drawn, and I get nervous. I don't want to overestimate one way or the other, and I don't know which way it goes. But if you continue to see, though Anthony points out, the support may be softer, it is growing. And if it continues to grow, then we might have a better indication of, I guess, how much weight to throw into that kind of analysis.
It's great that you brought up the crowds. I think the Conservatives should take heed from Kamala Harris about measuring crowds, because I don't think that's indicative of what your voter turnout and success will be. And I think for what, I mean, I agree with Allison as well that like Trump has been the factor throughout this. I think what I've been surprised by in this week of the election is the Conservatives simply not actually having a real economic message at this point. Like, I do think there's still time for voters to still decide, but I think a lot of conservative leaning voters who wanted to vote them were voting sort of in an anti-Trudeau manner. And I think what we're seeing is sort of there's actually a better option out there for me, that I can actually go back to someone who has some experience with this issue of the economic crisis, who gets it, who's measured, and could probably deal with the crisis that we're dealing with. And I think that's why you're seeing sort of opinion polling kind of going that way, and sort of that growing number of Liberal committed voters as well. And so as I think we get closer, I think, yeah, for sure that there will be a more solidified understanding of where people are lying. I mean, most voters tend to make their decision the last week and a half, but I think the Liberals have done a good job of really solidifying the economic and the sovereignty and dealing with the Canada-US file part of it, which is fundamentally the biggest one. So after that, it'll be important for Liberals to maintain that momentum with good policies that target the secondary and tertiary areas that matter to Canadians, which, you know, Anthony has mentioned as well for what the Conservatives are focusing on.
Okay, I have like a few minutes left. I want to get 30 seconds to each of you on this question, and you can build in your response to what you just heard. What like the beginning of a campaign, the first week, the last week, we know everyone has been around campaigns around this panel. They're usually pretty consequential. The middle is like a grab bag of different things. What will you be watching for next week, Allison?
I will be watching for Jagmeet Singh to really solidify his message to Canadians and to tell us more about what he has planned in terms of supporting Canadians domestically. I don't know that he has the ability to have much of a trade message right now, but looking at those domestic pieces and seeing if it's the kind of progressive economic populism that's going to resonate with people. And beyond that, I just look forward to the drama.
All right.
Events are everything.
Events, my dear, events. All right, Anthony, what about you? What are you going to watch for?
First of all, I just want to say I find it funny hearing Liberals say that Mr. Poilievre has nothing to say on the economy, when if you'd like to see what he has to say, you can look at the first half of Mark Carney's announcement so far. But beyond that, I think what we're going to look in the next week, it's April 2nd. I think, again, the second week of the campaign will largely be dominated around that looming tariff threat coming up on April 2nd with the territorial tariffs, and what campaigns are going to offer for Canadians concerned about that, and just how hard Donald Trump is going to decide to hit us over the head.
Okay, last 30 seconds to you, Mohammed.
I think it's fair to say April 2nd is going to be the thing that I'm going to be watching as well, and everyone will be, and what does Donald Trump ultimately decide? And then I think the 24 hours and 48 hours after that will be just as instructive, because he could change his mind very quickly, see that his own situation domestically doesn't work out, so he's going to pull back or give a reprieve to certain countries. I think that next 24 to 48 hours actually I'll be watching to see how it actually unfolds or gets retracted.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks so much for a great discussion and for sharing some of your Friday evening. Mohammed Ali, Anthony Kash, and Allison Gifford.